The Seattle skyline glittered like a shattered mirror. Puget Sound, catching the city's neon glow and tossing it back in ripples. Up on the 60th floor of the steel tower, the office was a cave of shadows, save for the soft hum of light spilling from the bay. Eva pushed her cleaning cart through the silence, the wheels squeaking like they had a personal grudge. Her hair, a cascade of tight black curls, was tied high in a messy bun, and her janitor's jumpsuit gray, oversized, unflattering, hung loose on her frame. She was 24, born and bred in Rainier Valley, with skin like polished ebony and eyes that burned when they caught the light. Right now, those eyes were half-focused, her lips moving softly as she hummed Etta James's At Last, the notes barely audible over the slosh of her mop. Eva didn't belong here, not in this glass and steel palace where billionaires played God. She belonged in the valley, where soul food joints and jazz clubs kept the night alive, where her mama's gospel voice still echoed in her dreams, but bills didn't pay themselves, and mama's hospital debt was a chain around her neck. So, she cleaned floors, kept her head down, and saved her real self for the sketch pad she hid in her locker, where she drew portraits of Rainier's heart kids on stoops, old ladies in church hats, the murals that screamed black joy. Tonight, though, she was just a ghost in a tower, mopping away the day's dirt. She didn't see him at first, didn't hear him. Alexander Steele stood in the doorway of his corner office, a shadow carved from the city's glow. He was 35 tall, with a jaw sharp enough to cut glass and eyes like a Chicago storm gray. Restless, dangerous. His black vest was unbuttoned, his tie long gone, and his sleeves rolled up to show forearms that looked like they could break more than just deals. He'd been at the Crocodile earlier, a grunge bar in Belltown, knocking back whiskey with Blake Turner and their usual crew. That's where it started, where Blake, half-drunk and smirking, pulled up a grainy security feed on his phone. "Bet you can't undress her," he'd said, zooming in on a woman mopping the steel tower's halls. Eva, the virgin janitor. Word is, she's never even kissed a guy. Untouchable. Alexander had laughed, the sound sharp and careless. He was a billionaire, the kind who turned failing startups into empires, who'd seduced actresses and heiresses without breaking a sweat. A janitor child's play. But now, watching her, he wasn't so sure. There was something about the way she moved, steady, unapologetic, like she owned the floor she cleaned. It wasn't just the dare pulling him in, it was her, and that was a problem. Late night. Huh. His voice cut through the quiet, low and smooth, like whiskey over ice. Eva froze, her mop stopping mid-swipe, her eyes snapped up, locking on him, and for a second he saw a flash of fire, wary, not scared. "Pays the bills," she said, her voice cool, measured, with a Rainier Valley edge. "You lost or something?" He chuckled, stepping into the light, and damn if that didn't make her pulse jump. He was trouble, the kind that wore $1,000 vests and smelled like power. "Alex," he said, leaning against a desk, arms crossed. "Just a guy who's bored. What's your deal?" "Janitor girl." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "My deal. Clean floors, pay mama's bills. You wouldn't get it." She dipped her mop back in the bucket, dismissing him, and that was new. No double take, no blush, no, "Oh my God, are you Alexander Steele?" She didn't know who he was, didn't care, and it hit him like a punch. "Try me," he said, his voice dropping, teasing. "I'm a damn good listener." She snorted, wringing out the mop with a practiced twist. Yeah. Then listen to this, I'm working. You're in my way. Go play king somewhere else. He laughed, genuinely, the sound echoing in the empty office. King. Huh. That's a new one. What's your name? She hesitated, her eyes narrowing like she was weighing whether he was worth the answer. Eva, she said finally, turning back to the floor. And no, I'm not going to ask what you do. If it matters, I'll figure it out. Fair enough. He stepped closer, just enough to make her pause, her grip tightening on the mop. The light from Puget Sound caught her face, highlighting the curve of her cheek, the stubborn set of her jaw. She was beautiful, not in the polished way he was used to, but in a raw, real way that made his chest tighten. You always this tough. Eva. Only when suits like you think they can charm me out of my paycheck. She shot back, but there was a flicker in her eyes, curiosity. Maybe. Or something else. What's your game? Alex. Nobody hangs out in an office at midnight for fun. No game. He lied, his smirk fading as he realized he meant it. The dare was still there. Blake's voice in his head. She's untouchable, but it wasn't about that anymore. It was about her. The way she looked at him like he was just a man, not a myth. Maybe I'm just curious. You don't seem like you belong here. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. No shit. This place ain't my vibe. But it pays. So I deal. She pushed the cart forward, forcing him to step aside. You're done wasting my time. He didn't move. His eyes locked on hers, and the air shifted, heavy with something neither of them could name. Not yet, he said, his voice softer now, almost a challenge. He reached out, his fingers brushing hers on the mop handle, and time slowed. Her skin was warm, calloused, real, and the contact sent a jolt through him, like touching a live wire. Her breath hitched, just for a second, and he saw it the way her eyes widened, the way her lips parted before she caught herself. Careful, she said, pulling her hand back, but her voice was quieter, less steady. The neon glow from the bay painted her in shades of blue and pink, making her look like a painting he'd never finish. His pulse was loud, too loud, and he caught the faint scent of her clean soap, a hint of lavender, and something uniquely her. The hum of the city outside, the distant crash of waves, faded until it was just them, just this moment. You're different, he said, almost to himself, his hand still hovering where hers had been. Good, she said, stepping back, breaking the spell. I'm not here to be your type. But her eyes lingered on him a second too long, and he knew she felt it, to that pull, that spark, like a match waiting to catch. See you tomorrow. Eva, he said, turning toward his office, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. She didn't answer, just pushed her cart down the hall, her humming picking up again, softer now, like a secret. But as she disappeared around the corner, Alexander felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't name. He'd come here to win a bet, to prove he could have anyone. Now, he wasn't so sure what he was chasing. Back at the Crocodile. The night had been a haze of whiskey and ego. The bar was packed, bodies pressed tight, the air thick with sweat and the gritty wail of a local band. Alexander had been at the VIP table, Blake across from him, their crew laughing too loud, tossing around bets like they owned the world. That's when Blake pulled out his phone, the security feed grainy but clear enough. Eva. he'd said, smirking. Rainier Valley girl. Works nights at your tower. Word is she's never been touched. Bet you can't get her to drop that jumpsuit. Alexander had leaned back, swirling his drink, his eyes on the screen. She was mopping, her movements steady, almost defiant, like she was telling the world to fuck off. He'd seen women chase him, models, CEOs, influencers, but this one, she didn't even look up. Easy, he'd said, but his gut had twisted, a warning he ignored. You're on. Now, standing in his office, the city sprawling below, he wasn't so sure. Eva wasn't a game. She was a storm, and he was already caught in the wind. Eva, meanwhile, walked home through Rainier Valley, the streets alive with neon signs and the smell of fried chicken from a late-night joint. Her jumpsuit was stuffed in her backpack, replaced by a hoodie and jeans, her sketch pad tucked under her arm. She should be pissed some suit creeping on her at work, but her mind kept replaying his eyes, his voice, the way his touch had burned. Stupid, she muttered, kicking a pebble. She didn't do rich guys, didn't do players, didn't do anyone. Her life was Mama's bills, her art, and keeping her head above water. But Alexander Alex had looked at her like she was more than a janitor, and that was dangerous. Her phone buzzed. A text from Tasha, her best friend. You good? Girl night shift again, Eva typed back. Yeah, just some suit trying to flirt. No biggie. She didn't mention the way her heart was still racing, didn't mention the dare she didn't know about. What she also didn't know was that a security camera in the tower's hallway had caught every second of their encounter, the way he'd stepped close, the way her eyes had lingered. The footage was already on Blake's phone, sent from an unknown number with a single line. Game started. Make it quick. What's next for Eva and this cocky billionaire? Will she see through his charm? Or is something bigger brewing? Smash that subscribe button and drop a comment with your predictions. This Seattle fire's just getting started, and you don't want to miss the heat. The Chicago skyline was a jagged crown of steel and glass, the magnificent mile pulsing with neon and noise. Eva Quinn stepped out of the cab in front of the Langham, her sneakers scuffing the polished sidewalk, her backpack slung over one shoulder like a shield. The air was sharp, thick with the smell of coffee from a nearby Starbucks and the hum of late-night traffic. She tugged at her faded hoodie, her curls spilling loose from a half-assed bun, and stared up at the hotel's golden facade. This wasn't her world. Rainier Valley's grit and soul were a million miles away, but Alexander Steele's text had been short and cocky. Chicago. Langham. 8 p.m. I got your ticket. Come. And Eva, against every ounce of her better judgment, had said yes. She still didn't know why. That night in his Seattle office, his gray eyes burning into her, his fingers brushing hers on the mop handle it had fucked with her head. Alexander wasn't just some suit. He was a storm, and she'd felt the pull of him, like gravity she couldn't shake. But she wasn't dumb. Guys like him didn't chase girls like her, not unless they wanted something. So why was she here? Standing in a city she'd never seen, about to walk into a room full of people who'd look at her like she was the help. The lobby was a goddamn palace, marble floors, chandeliers that looked like they cost more than her mama's house, and a buzz of rich folks in suits and dresses that screamed money. Eva's hoodie and ripped jeans made her feel like a smudge on a clean window, but she squared her shoulders, channeling the Rainier Valley fire that kept her going. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to figure out what Alexander's deal was. Connections. And she wasn't about to let anyone make her feel small. Miss Quinn. A concierge in a crisp suit approached, his smile too perfect to trust. Mr. Steele is expecting you. This way. Eva followed, her stomach doing flips as they weaved through the crowd to a private bar overlooking the Chicago River. The place was all velvet and gold, the kind of spot where you didn't ask for the bill. She spotted Alexander before he saw her, leaning against the bar like he owned the damn city. His navy suit was unbuttoned, his tie loose, and his dark hair was just messy enough to make her wonder if he'd been running his hands through it. He was talking to a woman, tall, blonde, dripping in diamonds, her laugh sharp as a knife. Eva's steps slowed. Who the hell is she? Alexander's eyes found hers across the room, and the world shrank. He ditched the blonde mid-sentence, crossing the bar in long, easy strides. "You made it," he said, his voice low, warm, like he'd been waiting all night just for her. His gaze swept over her hoodie, jeans, backpack, and lingered, like he was seeing something nobody else did. "Didn't think you'd show." "Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises," Eva shot back, trying to keep her cool even as her heart slammed against her ribs. "What's this place, a damn museum?" He laughed, a sound that did dangerous things to her insides. "Close enough. Come on, let's get you a drink." He led her to a corner booth, his hand brushing her lower back for a split second. The touch was electric, and Eva fought the urge to lean into it, her skin buzzing where he'd been. The blonde from earlier slithered over, her smile as fake as her tan. "Alex, darling, you didn't introduce me to your guest." Her voice was honey, but her eyes were ice, raking over Eva like she was trash. She extended a manicured hand. "Lauren Hayes. And you are..." Eva didn't take the hand. "Eva Quinn," she said, her chin lifting, her valley edge cutting through. "And I'm not his guest. I'm here for the free booze." Lauren's smile tightened, and Alexander's lips twitched, like he was holding back a grin. "Eva's an artist," he said, his tone casual but firm, like he was staking a claim. "Got more talent than half this room combined." "Charming," Lauren purred, but her eyes said bitch. "What kind of art mural street stuff?" The words dripped with condescension, like Eva was some kid tagging alleys. "Portraits," Eva said, her voice steady, though her nails dug into her palms. "People's stories on canvas. You wouldn't get it." "Oh, I'm sure it's cute." Lauren turned to Alexander, her hand grazing his arm. "We should catch up later." "Alex, alone." She sashayed off, leaving a trail of perfume and venom. Eva rolled her eyes. "What's her deal?" "Ex-girlfriend." "Something like that," Alexander said, his tone clipped, signaling the bartender for 2 whiskeys. "Ignore her. She's just fishing." "Seems like she's fishing for you," Eva muttered. Grabbing the glass, he slid her way. The whiskey burned, grounding her. "Why am I here, Alex?" "You don't even know me." He leaned closer, his elbow brushing hers on the table, his eyes locking on hers like he could see straight through her. "I know you're not like them." He nodded at the crowd, fake smiles, clinking glasses, all performance. "You're real, Eva. That's rare as hell." Her breath caught, his words hitting too close to the part of her that always felt invisible, too black for the art world, too broke for the city, too quiet for the loudmouths in the valley. But Alexander saw her, and it scared the shit out of her. "You're full of it," she said, looking away, focusing on the amber liquid in her glass. "Guys like you always got an angle." "No angle," he said, his voice softening. "Just you." Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it. A FaceTime call from Tasha. "Hold up," she told Alexander. stepping out to the hotel's terrace. The Chicago night was alive, cars honking, the river glittering under neon lights, the air sharp with city grit. Tasha's face popped up, her braids swinging, her grin wide. "Girl, you in Chicago?" Tasha's voice was half laugh, half disbelief. "With that suit from the tower. What the hell's going on?" "I don't know," Eva admitted, tugging at her hoodie. "He asked me to come. And I just did. It's crazy." "Right. Crazy. It's insane." Tasha's eyes narrowed. "Look, Eva, you're my ride or die, but dudes like him, they play and bounce. You're too dope for his bullshit." "He's not like that," Eva said, but her voice wavered. "Was he?" She barely knew him. Yet here she was, halfway across the country because of a look, a touch, a feeling. "He's different." Tasha sighed. "Just watch your back." "Okay, you're Eva Quinn, not some rich guy's toy." She winked. "Now go get that free whiskey." Eva laughed, the tension easing. "Love you, T. Love you too. Don't do anything I wouldn't." Tasha hung up, and Eva stood there, the city's pulse sinking into her bones. She didn't belong here. But damn if she didn't want to stay, just to see what Alexander was really about. When she turned, he was there, leaning against the terrace railing, his silhouette sharp against the river's glow. "Everything good?" he asked, his voice low, like he was testing the waters. "Yeah, just my girl checking. I haven't lost my damn mind." Eva shoved her phone in her pocket, suddenly aware of how close he was. The river breeze carried his scent whiskey, cedar, something dark and dangerous. "She thinks I'm nuts for being here." "She's not wrong," he said, a half smile tugging at his lips. "This world's a shark tank. Too many like Lauren. Then why'd you bring me?" She stepped closer, her boldness surprising her, her eyes challenging him. "What's your play?" "Alex." "No play." His voice dropped, and he pushed off the railing, closing the gap until she could feel his heat through her hoodie. "I saw you in that office, mopping like you owned the place, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. That's not a play. Eva, that's a problem." Her pulse spiked, and she swallowed hard. "You're the problem," she said. But her voice was barely a whisper, her body traitorously aware of him, the way his sleeve brushed her arm, the way his eyes traced her face like he was memorizing it. The river's hum mixed with the distant wail of a saxophone from a street performer. But all she felt was him, his intensity, his gravity. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said, his hand grazing her waist, light but deliberate, sending a jolt through her. The neon lights from the mile painted his face in shades of blue and red, making his eyes glow like a storm. Her skin tingled where he touched, and she caught the faint salt of the river mixing with his scent. "Let's walk." He led her down to the riverwalk, the path quiet except for the slap of water against the concrete. They didn't talk for a while, just walked, the silence thick with unspoken shit. Eva's mind was a mess. Tasha's warning, Lauren's venom, her own doubts, but her body was locked on Alexander, his steps matching hers, his presence like a magnet. They stopped under a bridge, the neon glow muted, the river's rhythm steady. "You don't fit here," he said, turning to face her, his voice rough, like he was fighting something inside. "But damn, you make me want to burn this whole city down just to keep you close." Her breath hitched, and before she could think, he was closer, his hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. The moonlight caught the planes of his face, and she felt the pull of him, like a tide she couldn't fight. "Alex," she started, but her voice faltered as his lips hovered near hers, his breath warm, tasting of whiskey and want. The saxophone's notes curled around them, slow and mournful, and her hands found his chest, fingers curling into his shirt. "You're gonna ruin me," he murmured. His lips so close she could almost taste them. Her heart was a drum, and she leaned in, her lips meeting his, soft at first, then hungry, like they'd both been starving. His kiss was hot, urgent, his tongue teasing hers in a way that made her knees weak. His hand slid to her lower back, pulling her flush against him, and she felt the hard lines of his body, the thump of his heart matching hers. The river's hum was drowned out by their breaths, the scrape of his stubble against her skin sending sparks through her. "Eva," he gasped when they broke apart, his forehead against hers, his breath ragged, her lips tingled, her body buzzing, and she felt his hands tremble, like he was holding himself back. "I'm not good at this. Good," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Neither am I." They stood there, tangled in the moment, the city alive around them. But then her phone buzzed, loud and jarring, shattering the haze. She pulled back, her chest heaving, and glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number. "Ask him about Daniel's last deal." Her stomach dropped, and she looked at Alexander, his face still flushed, his eyes searching hers. "What's wrong?" he asked, his hand on her arm. "Nothing," she lied, shoving her phone in her pocket. But as they walked back to the hotel, the message burned in her mind. Who was Daniel? And what the hell was Alexander hiding? Beale Street was a fever dream, all neon and blues, the heart of Memphis thumping with life. The air was thick with the smell of barbecue ribs and the wail of a guitar spilling from a dive bar. The kind of place where the music got under your skin and stayed there. Eva Quinn stood on a crowded sidewalk, her hoodie swapped for a black tank top that clung to her curves, her curls loose and wild under the streetlights. She was out of place. A Rainier Valley girl in a southern city, but the rhythm of Beale Street felt like home, like the jazz clubs back in Seattle where she'd lose herself in a sketch pad and a song. Tonight, though, she wasn't sketching. She was here with Alexander Steele. And that was a whole different kind of trouble. It had been a week since Chicago, since that kiss by the river that set her world on fire, since the anonymous text asked him about Daniel's last deal that planted a seed of doubt she couldn't shake. Eva had grilled Alexander on the flight back to Seattle, her voice low so the first-class snoots wouldn't hear. "Who's Daniel? And what's this deal shit?" she demanded. He'd gone quiet, his gray eyes darkening, and finally said, "Daniel was my best friend. Died in a car crash 3 years ago. I don't know about any deal, but I'm looking into it." His voice had been raw, like the words cut him open, and she'd let it go for now. But the texts kept coming, each one sharper. He's lying. Daniel trusted him, and Eva, who'd spent her life guarding her heart, felt it cracking. Alexander had brought her to Memphis for a music festival at Beale Street, a chance to get away from the noise, he'd said. But the noise followed them. The blogs hadn't stopped Billionaire's Seattle side piece. Who is Eva Quinn? Her phone was a war zone of notifications, trolls calling her a gold digger, art school friends ghosting her, even her mama, Gloria, texting. "You sure about this boy?" Baby Eva was sure of one thing: Alexander wasn't just a fling. That kiss, his hands on her, the way he looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. It was real. But real didn't mean safe, and the secrets he was keeping were starting to feel like a noose. They were staying at a boutique hotel off the Mississippi River, a place with exposed brick and jazz records spinning in the lobby. Alexander was different here, looser. His suits traded for a black tee and jeans. His hair mussed like he didn't give a damn. He'd been opening up, bit by bit, telling her about Daniel, his best friend since college, a coder who'd helped build Alexander's empire, a guy who'd laughed too loud and loved too hard. He was family. Alexander had said last night, his voice rough, his eyes on the river. And I let him down. Eva had wanted to push, to ask about the deal, the crash, but the pain in his face stopped her. She wasn't ready to break him. Not yet. Now, on Beale Street. The crowd surged around them, drunk on music and summer heat. Alexander was beside her, his hand brushing hers as they navigated the chaos. "You good?" he asked, his voice cutting through the guitar riffs, his eyes scanning her face like he could read her thoughts. "Yeah," Eva lied, her stomach twisting. Just not used to all this. She gestured at the neon signs, the tourists snapping selfies, the street performers juggling fire. It was vibrant, alive. But she felt like she was drowning Lauren's venom from Chicago. The texts, the headlines, all piling up. "You're a bad liar," he said, a half smile tugging at his lips. "Come on. Let's find some real music." He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a dive bar called Blues City Cafe, its windows foggy with heat and history. Inside, the air was sticky, the stage lit by a single spotlight. A guitarist bending notes that hit Eva like a prayer. They found a corner table, the wood scarred from years of spilled drinks, and Alexander ordered 2 beers, his knee brushing hers under the table. "You ever been to Memphis before?" she asked, sipping her beer, trying to keep things light even as her mind churned. "Nah," he said, leaning back, his eyes on her. "Chicago's my spot. But this place, it's got soul. Like you." She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks warmed. "Smooth talker. Bet you say that to all the janitors." "Only the ones who sing Etta James while mopping my floors," he shot back, and damn if that didn't make her laugh, the sound loosening the knot in her chest. For a moment, it was just them, the music wrapping around them like a cocoon, the world's bullshit locked outside. But then a familiar face cut through the crowd, and Eva's laugh died. Malik Carter, her old friend from Rainier Valley, stood by the bar, his dreads tied back, his paint-splattered jacket a dead giveaway. He was a graffiti artist, always tagging murals around Seattle, and he'd been her rock since high school. The guy who'd sit with her at 2 a.m., passing a blunt and talking dreams. He was in Memphis for an art festival, she remembered. But seeing him here felt like a collision of worlds. Eva Malik's voice was warm, surprised, as he crossed to their table. His eyes flicked to Alexander, narrowing. "What you doing here, girl?" And who's this? Alexander's posture stiffened, his hand tightening on his beer. "Alex," he said, his tone cool, sizing Malik up. "And you are Malik," he said, squaring his shoulders, his gaze locked on Eva. "Eva's people. Been looking out for her since we were kids. You her new boss or something?" Eva's stomach sank. "Chill. Malik," she said, her voice sharp. "Alex is a friend." The word felt wrong, too small for the fire between them, but she didn't know what else to call it. A friend. Huh. Malik's eyes softened, but there was hurt in them. You sure about this? Eva, you're Rainier Valley, not some penthouse queen. This dude's gonna hurt you. Enough, Eva snapped, standing, her hands fisted. I'm not a kid. Malik, I can handle my own shit. Malik's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Just watch your back. He shot Alexander a hard look before melting back into the crowd, leaving a trail of tension in his wake. Alexander's silence was heavy. He's got it bad for you, he said finally, his voice tight, his eyes on his beer. He's just protective, Eva said, but her voice wavered. Malik had always been there, steady, safe. A piece of home. Alexander was the opposite, a wildfire she couldn't control. Why do you care? Because I do, he said, his eyes snapping to hers, fierce and unguarded. I don't know what this is, Eva, but I care, more than I should. Her pulse roared, and she wanted to run, to hide from the intensity of him, but her feet wouldn't move. The guitarist hit a low, mournful note, and the crowd faded, leaving just them. Just this. Your trouble, she said, echoing their first night, her voice barely audible over the music. Damn right, he murmured, standing and offering his hand. Dance with me. She hesitated, her heart a mess, but took his hand, letting him pull her to a corner of the bar where couples swayed under strings of yellow lights. The music slowed, a blues ballad that felt like it was written for them, and he drew her close, his hand on her lower back, his other hand laced with hers. The lights cast a golden glow across her skin, highlighting the curve of her neck, the stubborn set of her jaw. His breath was warm against her temple, and she caught his scent, whiskey, cedar, him mixing with the smoky air of Beale Street. You don't dance like a billionaire, she said, her voice teasing, trying to keep it light even as her body hummed with his nearness. You don't dance like a janitor, he shot back, his lips brushing her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. His hand tightened on her waist, pulling her closer, and she felt the heat of him, the way his body fit against hers, like it was made to. The guitar wailed, the notes curling around them, and her hands slid up his chest, fingers curling into his shirt. His lips grazed her neck, light but deliberate, leaving a trail of fire. And she gasped, her nails digging into his shoulders. Alex, she whispered, her voice trembling with want. The lights flickered, the music a pulse, and she felt him everywhere, his breath on her skin, his hands anchoring her, his heartbeat under her palms. The crowd was a blur, the bar a haze, and for a moment, it was just them, swaying in a world that didn't exist. I'm fucking scared of this, he murmured, his lips still against her neck, his voice raw. But I want you, Eva, more than I've ever wanted anything. Her throat tightened, and she pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, seeing the storm in them, fear, want, truth. Good, she said, her voice shaky. That makes two of us. They didn't kiss, not yet. But the dance was more intimate than any kiss, their bodies speaking what their words couldn't. The song ended, but they stayed there, tangled, until the crowd's applause broke the spell. He led her outside, the night air cool against their flushed skin. and they walked along Beale Street, the music fading behind them. "I need to tell you something," he said, stopping by a neon-lit mural, his voice heavy. "Daniel. He wasn't just my friend. He worked for me, coded half my company's backbone. The night he died, he was digging into a deal, a shady one I didn't know about. I think someone set him up, Eva, and I think they're coming for me now." Her blood ran cold, the texts flashing in her mind. "You think it wasn't an accident?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear. "I don't know," he said, his jaw tight. "But my investigators pulling records. Lauren was around back then, working with Daniel. She knows something. I'm sure of it." Eva's stomach twisted. Lauren, the blonde from Chicago, the one who'd looked at her like dirt. "She's the one sending the texts," Eva said, pulling out her phone and showing him the latest. "Daniel trusted him. You shouldn't. She's been at it since Chicago." Alexander's face darkened, his hands fisting. "She's playing a dangerous game," he said, his voice low, lethal. "But I'll end it." Eva nodded, but the unease lingered. The music from Beale Street was a distant hum now, the night closing in. She looked at Alexander, his face lit by neon. His eyes locked on her like she was his anchor. She didn't know if she could trust him. Not fully, not with the secrets piling up. But one thing was clear, whatever they'd started in that Seattle office wasn't just a dare anymore. It was a fire, and it was burning them both. Rain battered Seattle like it was trying to wash the city clean. The streets of Rainier Valley slick and glowing under stuttering streetlights. Eva Quinn stood on this balcony of Alexander Steele's penthouse, high above the chaos, her hoodie soaked through, her curls plastered to her neck. The air was sharp with the scent of wet asphalt and the faint tang of soul food drifting from a diner below. But all she could feel was the weight in her chest, heavy as the storm. Puget Sound churned in the distance, its waves a dull roar, and the city's neon glow painted her in streaks of blue and green. She gripped the railing, her knuckles pale, trying to breathe through the mess her life had become. It had been 3 days since Memphis, since that slow dance on Beale Street that felt like a vow, since Alexander's confession about Daniel, his best friend, dead in a crash that might have been no accident, since the texts from Lauren Hayes, each one a blade. Daniel trusted him. You shouldn't. Eva had confronted Alexander on the flight back, her voice low, her eyes hard. What's Lauren got on you? Alex, what's she know about Daniel? He'd sworn he didn't have answers, but his investigator was digging, pulling records from Daniel's last months. She's trying to tear us apart, he'd said, his hand on hers, his gray eyes pleading. But Eva wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The man she was falling for was tangled in secrets, and she was paying the price. The media had gone feral. Headlines screamed billionaire's Seattle hustler. Eva Quinn's gold-digging game blogs dug into her life, her mama's hospital bills, her art school dropout status, even a blurry photo of her mopping floors at Steel Tower. Her phone was a war zone, trolls calling her a ghetto climber, her classmates unfollowing her. Her mama, Gloria, calling with a voice full of worry, baby. This man's world's too big for you. Eva had stopped checking her notifications, stopped sketching, stopped everything but surviving. And Alexander, he was fighting, his legal team shutting down blogs, his voice steady when he told her, I've got you. But she saw the cracks, his clenched jaw, the way his hand shook when he thought she wasn't looking. His board was circling, investors whispering about instability, and Eva knew she was the spark that could burn his empire down. Tonight was supposed to be a reset. Alexander had brought her to his penthouse, a glass and steel fortress overlooking the city. To talk, he'd said. But the air between them was charged, ready to ignite. Eva stared out at the rain, her heart a war drum, and heard the balcony door slide open behind her. Alexander stepped out, his black shirt clinging to his chest from the downpour, his hair wet and mussed, his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, locked on her, and she felt the pull of him, even now, even when she wanted to run. "You're gonna freeze out here," he said, his voice low, rough from the whiskey he'd been sipping inside. He stopped a few feet away, like he knew she needed space. "I'm fine," she said, her voice sharp, her arms crossed tight. "Rain's the least of my problems." "Alex," he flinched, like she'd hit him, but he didn't back off. "Talk to me." "Eva, what's going on?" She laughed, bitter, turning to face him, her curls dripping. "What's going on?" "My life's a fucking circus. That's what. I got fired today. Alex, my boss said I'm a liability because of you. The whole world thinks I'm some gold-digging hoe, and I can't even walk down my street without people staring. And you're standing there like it's all gonna be okay. But it's not." His jaw tightened, and he stepped closer, the rain sluicing down his face. "You're not a liability," he growled. "You're the only thing keeping me grounded, and I'm handling it. My team's suing those blogs, and I'll get your job back. I swear." "My job?" She stepped toward him, her voice rising, her eyes blazing. "I don't want your pity, Alex. I don't want your lawyers fixing my life like I'm some broken toy. I'm not worth your damn empire, and you know it." "Don't say that," he snapped, closing the gap, his hands caging her against the railing. "You're worth more than all this shit combined. You think I care about the board, about the headlines? You're in me, Eva, and I can't get you out." Her breath hitched, his words slicing through her defenses. He was close, too close, his heat cutting through the rain, his scent whiskey, cedar, him flooding her senses. The city's neon lights flashed below, a chaotic pulse that matched her heart. She wanted to believe him, wanted to fall into him, but the fear was louder. "Then why's it feel like I'm breaking you?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Every day. It's another article, another text, another piece of me they rip apart. And now this Daniel shit. What aren't you telling me?" His face darkened, and he stepped back, running a hand through his wet hair. "I told you. Eva, Daniel was digging into a deal, a dirty one I didn't know about. He called me that night, said he'd found something, someone screwing us over. Then he crashed. I thought it was an accident. But now, I'm not sure." And Lauren Eva pressed, her voice trembling. "She was there, wasn't she? She knows something, and you're not telling me what." "I don't know what she knows," he shouted, his voice raw, echoing in the rain. "She worked with Daniel. Yeah, but she's been playing games ever since. My investigators pulling her financials, her calls. If she's behind this, I'll bury her." Eva's stomach twisted, the texts flashing in her mind. He's lying. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking, and showed him the latest, a grainy audio clip. Daniel's voice. Panicked Alex. "There's a traitor in the deal. Watch your back." The timestamp was hours before his crash. "What's this?" "Alex," she demanded, "why didn't you tell me?" He stared at the phone, his face paling, his hands fisting. "I didn't know," he said, his voice low. broken. He left me a voicemail that night, but it cut off. I thought, fuck. I thought it was nothing. Nothing. Eva's voice broke, and she shoved him, her hands hitting his chest. Your best friend's dead, Alex. And I'm out here getting dragged through the mud because of your secrets. I can't do this. You can, he said, grabbing her wrists, pulling her close. We can. Eva. Together. Together. She yanked free, tears mixing with the rain. You live in penthouses. Alex. I live in a shithole with a busted sink and a mama who's barely holding on. Your ex is on TV calling me a hustler, and I'm supposed to just take it? Fuck that. Lauren's a liar, he said, his voice hard. She's doing this because she can't stand us. She's been after me since Daniel, and now she's hitting where it hurts. Then why's it feel like you're the one hurting me? Eva whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. She turned back to the railing, her shoulders shaking, the city a blur through her tears. He didn't answer right away, just stood there, rain streaming down his face, his eyes on her like she was the only thing keeping him upright. Because I fucked up, he said finally, his voice rough. I started this with a bet. Eva, a stupid, shitty bet to prove I could have you. But it's not about that anymore. It's about you. About us. I love you. And I'm not letting you go. Her heart stopped, his words a lightning strike. I love you. She turned, her eyes wide, searching his face. He looked wrecked, his shirt clinging to his chest, his hands trembling. You don't get to say that, she said, her voice shaking. Not when I'm falling apart. Then let me hold you together, he said, stepping closer, his hands cupping her face. The rain was a curtain, shutting out the world, and his touch was warm, grounding, despite the cold. I'm not good at this, Eva. I'm a selfish bastard, but I'm trying. For you. Her breath hitched, and the fight drained out of her, replaced by something hotter, messier. The neon lights flashed, casting shadows across his face, and she felt the pull of him, undeniable, unstoppable. You're gonna ruin me, she whispered, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. Good. He growled, and then he kissed her, hard and desperate, like he was drowning and she was air. His lips were hot, tasting of rain and whiskey, his tongue claiming hers with a hunger that stole her breath. His hands slid under her hoodie, fingers splaying across her bare back, warm against her chilled skin. She gasped into his mouth, her nails digging into his shoulders, and he pressed her against the railing, the metal cool against her spine. The storm roared, drowning out everything but their breaths, the scrape of his stubble against her cheek, the way his body fit hers like it was made to. Her hoodie hit the floor, and she didn't care, lost in the heat of him, the way his hands roamed, reverent, like she was something sacred. Eva. He groaned, his lips trailing to her neck, leaving fire in their wake. Her hands slid under his shirt, tracing the hard planes of his chest, and he shuddered, a sound that sent a thrill through her. The rain was a rhythm, the city a pulse, and they stumbled back into the penthouse, the glass door sliding shut, leaving a trail of water. He backed her against the sofa, his hands everywhere, her hips, her hair, her face, and she pulled him down, their bodies crashing together, clothes falling like leaves. The neon glow seeped through the windows, painting their skin in electric hues, and for a moment, she forgot the texts, the headlines, the fear. There was only him, only this. I love you, he said again, his voice hoarse, his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. They didn't go further. Not tonight. The moment too raw, too fragile. But the closeness was enough. A vow in itself. But then her phone buzzed, loud and insistent, shattering the haze. She froze, her chest heaving, and Alexander pulled back, his eyes dark with want but clouded with worry. "Ignore it," he said, his hand on her cheek. She shook her head, reaching for her phone on the coffee table. Another text from the unknown number. Daniel's deal was with the devil. Ask about the contract. Attached was a scanned page, a contract with Daniel's signature, dated the day he died, and a name redacted in black. Eva's blood ran cold, and she showed Alexander, her voice trembling. "What the fuck is this?" "Alex." His face hardened, but he didn't look away. "I don't know," he said, his voice low. "But I'll find out. I swear." She stared at him, doubt creeping in like poison. "You better," she said, pulling her hoodie back on, her heart a mess. "Because I'm not your pawn." "Alex, I'm not playing your game. I'm not playing," he said, his voice fierce. But she was already moving, grabbing her backpack, her resolve crumbling. "Ava, wait, I can't," she said, her eyes burning. "I love you, Alex, but I can't do this if you're not all in." She left him standing there, rain pooling at his feet, his hands clenched like he was fighting not to follow. She took the elevator down, the storm's roar fading, and checked into a cheap motel in Rainier Valley. Her bag slung over her shoulder, she sat on the sagging bed, her phone in her hand, and typed a note she'd leave for him later. "I love you, but I can't be your downfall." As she stared at the screen, another text came through. "Good move. Stay gone." Eva's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. Whoever was watching, whatever they wanted, she wasn't running. Not yet. But she needed space. Time to figure out who she was, without Alexander's world swallowing her whole. Back in the penthouse, Alexander stood alone, the city sprawling below, his phone buzzing with a call from his investigator. "We got something," the voice said. "Lauren's not working alone. Someone higher-up's pulling strings, and they're tied to Daniel's contract." Savannah's Forsyth Park was a cathedral of Spanish moss and ancient oaks, the late afternoon sun spilling golden light through the branches. Eva Quinn sat on a rickety bench near the park's fountain, her sketch pad open on her lap. But her pencil hadn't touched the page in hours. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of magnolias and river mud, and the distant hum of cicadas mixed with the soft splash of the fountain. Her hoodie was swapped for a loose tank top, her curls free and catching the breeze, but her eyes, those fierce, Rainier Valley eyes, were tired, shadowed by 10 days of running from her own heart. She'd come to her Aunt Lena's house in Savannah to escape the storm that had swallowed her life in Seattle. The headlines, "Billionaire's Seattle Hustler," had faded, replaced by some tech mogul's tax scandal, but the damage lingered. Her job was gone, her art school dreams on hold, and her mama, Gloria, had left voicemails thick with worry. "Baby, come home. This ain't you." Worst of all was the ache for Alexander Steele, the man she'd left standing in the rain, his "I love you" still echoing in her bones. She'd written that note, "I love you, but I can't be your downfall," and meant it. But every night, she stared at her phone, fighting the urge to call him. The anonymous texts hadn't stopped. Each one a fresh-cut Daniel's deal was with the devil. Ask about the contract. The latest, sent 2 days ago, was a photo of a contract page with Daniel's signature and a redacted name, captioned, "He's closer than you think." Eva's gut told her Alexander wasn't the enemy, but doubt was a poison she couldn't shake. She'd been sketching to cope, filling pages with Savannah's soul kids playing in the park, old men on porches, the river's lazy flow, but her heart wasn't in it. She was lost, caught between the girl she'd been in Rainier Valley and the woman she was becoming with Alexander. The fountain's splash was a steady rhythm, grounding her, until footsteps crunched on the gravel path, slow and deliberate. She looked up, and her breath caught. Alexander Steele stood there. No suit, no tie, just a faded gray tee and jeans, his dark hair mussed by the wind, his gray eyes, stormy as ever, locked on her. And he looked like he hadn't slept in days, tired, raw, but still hers. He carried a duffel bag, like he'd come straight from the airport, and his presence hit her like a tidal wave, pulling her under. "Eva," he said, his voice rough, carrying over the fountain's hum. "You're a damn hard woman to find." Her sketchpad slipped to the bench, her hands trembling. "How'd you know I was here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her heart pounding like a drum. He stepped closer, his boots sinking into the soft earth. "You mentioned your aunt's place once, back in Memphis. Tracked down Lena Quinn in Savannah. Wasn't easy, but I'm stubborn as hell." He gave a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Or maybe you left enough breadcrumbs 'cause you wanted me to come." She stood, her tank top fluttering in the breeze, and crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together. "Don't flatter yourself. Steele, I needed space, not a knight in shining armor." "I'm no knight," he said, dropping the duffel, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm just a guy who can't breathe without you. I walked away from $100 million deal to find you, Eva. Let the board scream, let the headlines burn. I don't give a shit. It's you." Her eyes widened, shock rooting her in place. "You did what you heard me." He took another step, closing the gap, his voice low, fierce. "Money's just noise. Eva, you're the only thing that's real." Her throat tightened, and she looked away, focusing on the fountain spray to keep from falling apart. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice shaky. "Your company, your investors, they're already gunning for you because of me. I saw the news. Alex, they're calling you a liability, saying you're losing it. Fuck them," he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the cicada's hum. "I've spent years building walls, thinking power was enough. Then you walked in, all fire and truth, and you tore them down. I'd rather lose everything than lose you." Tears stung her eyes, and she blinked them back, her voice trembling. "What about Daniel? The texts, the contract. What are you hiding?" He froze, his face paling, and for a moment, she thought he'd shut down. But then he spoke, his voice low, raw. "I told you about the deal. Eva, Daniel found something, someone screwing us over. That contract you saw, it's real. My investigator tracked it to a shell company. But the name's buried deep. Lauren was involved. But she's not the top dog. Someone bigger's pulling strings. And they're the ones who might have taken Daniel out." Eva's blood ran cold. the photo of the contract flashing in her mind. "You think he was murdered?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear. "I don't know," he admitted, his eyes haunted. "But I'm close to answers. Lauren's been meeting with a fixer in Chicago, someone tied to the contract. If she's behind the texts, or if she knows who is, I'll end it." The intensity in his voice sent a chill through her, but it wasn't fear, it was the realization that he was fighting for her, for them, in a way she hadn't dared hope. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, softer now. "Because I didn't want you caught in the crossfire," he said, stepping closer, his voice cracking. "But I fucked up. Eva, I should have trusted you with everything. I'm not good at this letting people in, but I'm trying. For you." She looked at him, really looked, and saw the man beneath the billionaire, tired, broken, but standing here, bearing his soul. The sunset was fading, casting a golden glow across his face, and the fountain's splash was a steady rhythm, grounding her. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I love you, Alex, but I'm scared we're gonna crash and burn." "So am I," he said, his voice raw. "But I'd rather burn with you than live without you." Her breath caught, and before she could stop herself, she closed the distance, her hands fisting in his tea, pulling him in. He wrapped his arms around her, his hold fierce, and they stood there, holding each other as the cicadas sang. The world felt far away, the headlines, the texts, the doubts fading into the magnolia-scented air. But Eva knew they couldn't stay like this forever. "Come with me," Alexander said, pulling back just enough to look at her, his eyes burning. "There's something I need to show you." He led her through the park, the gravel crunching under their feet, to a secluded grove where the oaks formed a canopy, the sunset's last rays filtering through. The air was warm, the river's hum a soft backdrop, and he stopped, turning to face her. "Ava," he said, his voice low. "I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever." Her heart raced, and she felt the pull of him, stronger than ever. "Then hold on tight," she said, her voice a challenge, "'cause I'm a damn mess." He laughed, a sound that warmed her from the inside. And then he kissed her, slow at first, like he was savoring her. His lips were warm, tasting of salt and him, and his hands slid under her tank top, fingers grazing her bare waist, sending a shiver through her. The touch was electric, and she pressed closer, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him down. The sunset painted their skin in gold, and the river's hum mixed with their breaths, the rustle of leaves a soft counterpoint. His stubble scraped her cheek, his lips trailing to her neck, leaving a trail of fire, and she gasped, her nails digging into his shoulders. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling with want. His hands tightened on her hips, pulling her against him, and she felt the heat of him, the way his body fit hers like a puzzle piece. The grove was their sanctuary, the world locked out, and she let herself fall into him, her tank top slipping off one shoulder, her skin bare under his touch. His breath was hot against her ear, his voice a low growl. "I've got you, Eva, always." They didn't go further, the moment too raw, too sacred, but the closeness was everything a promise forged in the fire they'd survived. They pulled back, reluctantly, the night air cooling their skin. Alexander's eyes were bright, his smile soft. "Come back to Seattle with me," he said, his hand squeezing hers. "We'll face it together, the media. Lauren, the truth about Daniel. No more running." Eva hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. She wanted to say yes, to dive back into his world, but the texts, the contract, the secrets, they lingered like shadows. "On one condition," she said, her voice steady. "No more half-truths. If we're doing this, we're all in. Deal," he said, his thumb brushing her knuckles. All in. As they walked back to Aunt Lena's house, hand in hand, Eva's phone buzzed again. She ignored it, but the unease crept in. Later, alone in her room, she checked the message. "You're digging too deep. The contract's just the start." Attached was a blurry photo of a man in a suit, his face obscured, holding a file stamped with Daniel's name. Eva's blood ran cold, her fingers trembling. Whoever was watching wasn't done, and they were closer than she'd thought. Back in Chicago, Alexander's investigator sat in a dimly lit office, staring at a laptop. "We've got a hit," he told his partner. "The shell company tied to Daniel's contract, it's linked to someone on Steele's board. And they're not happy he's asking questions. Rainier Valley was a living pulse, a riot of neon and soul that refused to be tamed." Eva Quinn stood at the heart of the Langston Hughes Community Center, her hands steady as she pinned a final sketch to the wall. The room thrummed with life locals in their Sunday best, artists from the valley's underground scene, and a handful of reporters circling like vultures. Tonight was her art show, a raw spill of her heart in ink and charcoal portraits of her mama's gospel choir. Tasha's laugh caught mid-note, the old man flipping burgers at the corner diner. But the peace-stealing whispers was a sketch of Alexander Steele, his face carved in shadow, his gray eyes blazing with something unspoken, something only she could name. She'd poured everything into it. And now, under the center's flickering lights, she felt exposed, like her soul was on display for Rainier Valley to judge. 2 weeks had passed since Savannah, since that sunset kiss under the oaks that stitched her back to Alexander, since they'd sworn to face the storm together. The anonymous texts hadn't stopped, each one a fresh wound. "You're digging too deep. The contract's just the start." The latest, a blurry photo of a man with a file marked Daniel, had come with a chilling caption, "He's closer than you think." Eva had shown Alexander, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut, and he'd gone still, his jaw tight. "My investigator's closing in," he'd said, his hand gripping hers. "Lauren's a pawn, but the real player's on my board. We'll find them." The truth about Daniel's death. Alexander's best friend, killed in a crash that wasn't an accident, was a blade hovering over them. And Eva knew it wasn't just about love anymore. It was about survival. The media had backed off, chasing some crypto bros meltdown. But the scars lingered. Eva's janitor job was gone. Her art school dreams on pause. And her mama, Gloria, had pulled her aside last night, her voice heavy. "This man's world's afire. Baby, you sure you can handle the burn?" Eva had nodded, her heart sure. "He's worth it, Mama, because he fights for me." And Alexander did every day, in the way he showed up, in the way he'd bankrolled this show not to flex, but to amplify her voice. "Your art's the truth," he'd said, his eyes warm. Let them see it. So here she was, in a black dress that hugged her curves, her curls wild, ready to show the valley she was more than a headline. The crowd parted, and Alexander walked in, his presence like a match in a gas leak. He ditched the CEO polish for a black button-down and jeans, but he still carried that billionaire edge, making heads turn. His eyes locked on hers, and he smiled, a private thing that lit her up inside. "You killed it," he said. Stopping beside her, his voice low over the chatter. "This place is all you tonight." "Not without you," she said, her hand brushing his, the contact sparking through her. "You didn't have to fund this." "Alex?" "Yeah, I did." He leaned closer, his breath warm on her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "You're my everything, Eva. Always will be." Her heart tripped, but before she could reply, Tasha swooped in, her braids swinging, her grin wide as the sound. "Girl, this is fucking fire," she said, pulling Eva into a hug. "You got the valley shining tonight, even if you're rolling with this penthouse king." She shot Alexander a teasing glare, but her eyes were soft. "Careful." "Tasha," Alexander said, smirking. "I might win you over yet. Dream on, rich boy." Tasha laughed, squeezing Eva's arm before melting back into the crowd. The night was a blur, handshakes, praise. A few photographers Alexander's security hustled out. But the real moment hit when Eva took the mic, her sketch of Alexander glowing behind her under a spotlight. The room hushed, and she felt every stare, heavy but not crushing. "This show's for Rainier Valley," she said, her voice steady, her valley edge sharp. "For the people who raised me, who taught me to find beauty in the fight. These sketches, they're my truth, my home, and no blog, no hater, no bullshit is taking that away." The crowd roared, applause crashing like waves, but Eva's eyes were on Alexander. He stood at the back, his face soft, proud, and something deeper, something that made her want to run to him. Then a reporter shouted, "Ms. Quinn, what's the deal with Alexander Steele Muse or Sugar Daddy?" The room froze, and Eva's blood boiled. She gripped the mic, her voice cutting like glass. "Alex is my partner, not my ATM. Write that shit down." The crowd erupted, some cheering, others murmuring, but Alexander's smile was her anchor. He pushed through to the front, taking the mic with a nod. "My turn," he said, his voice calm but commanding, silencing the room. "Eva Quinn's not a headline. She's not a fling. She's the realest thing I've ever known, the kind of truth that makes you want to be better. I've built an empire, but it's nothing without her. So if you're here for gossip, you're wasting your time. This is her night, and I'm just honored to be in it." The room exploded, cheers and whistles drowning out the skeptics. Eva's eyes burned, and she grabbed his hand, squeezing tight. "You didn't have to go that hard," she whispered as they stepped off the stage, her voice thick. "Yeah, I did," he said, his thumb brushing her knuckles, his eyes locked on hers. "You're mine, Eva, and I'm not hiding it anymore." They slipped into a back room, the center's old walls muffling the crowd's hum. The air was warm, smelling of paint and history, and a single window let in the glow of Rainier Valley's streetlights, casting golden stripes across the floor. Eva turned to him, her heart racing, and saw the fire in his eyes, the same fire she'd felt since that first night in his office. "You meant every word out there," she said, her voice soft, stepping closer. "Didn't you? Every damn one," he said, his hands finding her waist, pulling her in. "I love you, Eva. Not because of some stupid bet, but because you make me want to be a man who deserves you." Her breath caught, and she surged up, kissing him, deep and hungry, like she could pour her soul into it. His lips were hot, tasting of whiskey and him, and his hands slid up her back, fingers tangling in her curls, anchoring her. The streetlights painted their skin in gold, and the faint pulse of a soul track Al Green maybe drifted from the main room, wrapping them in its rhythm. Her dress shifted, the fabric sliding against her skin as he pulled her closer, his hands tracing her curves, reverent, like she was a song he'd never stop singing. She gasped when his lips found her neck, his stubble grazing her skin, sending sparks through her. "Alex," she murmured, her hands slipping under his shirt, feeling the heat of his chest, the steady thump of his heart. The room was their sanctuary, the music a heartbeat, and she felt him everywhere, his breath hot on her ear, his fingers on her hips, his love in the way he held her like she was his world. They sank onto a worn couch, her legs draped over his, and for a moment, they just stayed there, tangled, breathing each other in. The world locked out. "I'm not running anymore," she whispered, her forehead against his. "But we've got a fight coming. Alex, Voss, the contract, all of it." He nodded, his hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "We'll take it down, together." They talked strategy, his voice low as he shared the latest from his investigator. Lauren had cracked, admitting she'd leaked the texts and articles for a payout from Richard Voss, a board member with a web of offshore accounts. Voss was the key, tied to the shell company in Daniel's contract, and Alexander's team had proof wire transfers, encrypted emails. "We've got enough to nail him," Alexander said, his eyes hard. "But he's not alone. Someone bigger's backing him, and they're the ones who might have killed Daniel." Eva's jaw tightened. "Then we hit Voss hard," she said, her voice fierce. "Expose him. Make him talk. For Daniel. For Daniel." He agreed, his hand squeezing hers, his eyes burning with resolve. But the moment broke when her phone buzzed, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet. She grabbed it, her heart sinking at the unknown number. The message was a video grainy, but chilling a man in a suit, his face obscured. In a boardroom at Steel Tower, his voice was cold, Steel's too close. "End it now." The table held 2 files, one with Daniel's name, one with Eva's. The timestamp was yesterday. Eva's blood froze, and she showed Alexander, whose face turned to ice. "They're coming for you," he said, his voice a growl, his hands fisting. "Voss knows we're on to him." "Then we move first," Eva said, her voice steady, her valley fire blazing. "We take him down. Alex. For Daniel. For us." He nodded, pulling her close, his lips crashing into hers in a fierce, desperate kiss. "We will," he said, his voice a vow. "But we're playing smart. Eva, Voss is a snake, and I'm not losing you." They left the center hand in hand, Rainier Valley's neon wrapping them in its glow. A street saxophonist played a slow, haunting tune, its notes curling into the night. Eva looked at Alexander, his face lit by the city, and smiled. "We started with a dumb bet," she said, her voice soft. "Now look at us. Best bet I ever lost," he said, kissing her temple, his smile warm. "This is just the start, Valley Girl." But as they reached his car, Eva's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, expecting another threat. Instead, it was an audio clip, Daniel's voice, panicked. "Time-stamped the night he died, Alex. It's not just Voss. There's someone else higher up. They'll kill to keep it quiet. Eva's heart stopped, and she showed Alexander, whose eyes narrowed, his voice a low growl. "We're not done," he said, "not by a long shot." As they drove into the night, Rainier Valley fading behind them, Eva leaned against him, her hand in his. They'd survived the lies, the fire, the noise, but the truth about Daniel, Voss, and the shadow above them was still out there, waiting. And Eva knew their fight was just beginning. Across town, in a penthouse overlooking Puget Sound, Richard Voss stood at a window, a glass of scotch in hand. A figure stepped from the shadows, their voice low, commanding. "Steele's closing in," they said. "And the girl's a problem." Voss smiled, cold and calculated. "Then we break them both," he said, "starting with her."